Okay, so Lou Elizondo weighs in on the UAP Task Force report. Let's get into it. Before I do, please hit like, please subscribe, share on social media, and as I'm going through it, comment below and let me know what you think. Okay, let's see what he has to say. Afterwards, I'll parse it a little bit, and then I will add my own thoughts on the UAP Task Force report. By the way, this is a long interview. This is over 4 or 5 minutes long. So instead of playing the whole thing, I'm only going to play select portions of it, but I will provide a link to the full interview below. Okay, here's what he had to say.
What do you take from this? What have we learned?
Well, this is certainly a historic moment for us, for our country, and I think for our military and our intelligence community. The government has formally and officially come out and informed Congress that these things are A, they're real, and two, that they're not ours, and that they seem to be performing, at least some of them, as you say, in remarkable ways. And I'll tell you something else that I find very interesting. You mentioned it, out of the 144 cases, we only were able to solve one, but there's two subnotes to that. And the first one is, when you look at this report very carefully, you'll notice that really the reporting only began in around the March 2019 time era when the Navy established its reporting requirements, and then later on in November 2020, maybe about 8 months ago, with the Air Force. So we have 144 reports really concentrating in just the last year and a half involving only military equities. And then the report further stipulates that a large majority of reporting really goes unreported. Why? Because of stigma and taboo, which is something that you and I are both very familiar with involving this topic. So one can surmise that there's actually a lot more than just 144 incidents involving the Navy in just the last year and a half, let alone, as you say, since the late 1940s.
So the report all but says what is obvious to anyone who thinks about this, which is these are not from a foreign military. And maybe the lackadaisical approach, or the disorganized approach on the part of the military to looking into this suggests that too. If we thought these were Chinese, we'd be on it. And so we don't think they're Chinese. They're not Chinese and they're not Russian. So they're extraterrestrial. I mean, what's the other? I mean, let's just say it. I mean, what's the other explanation? Potentially.
Well, Tucker, that's a fantastic question, because as we've said before, when I was an E.T.s, this is something that could involve outer space, inner space, or frankly, the space in between. I think from this report's perspective, if you notice the very first line in the report is, this is a preliminary report, which is indicative of the fact that hopefully there will be other reports forthcoming. In the report, they stipulate that we need a lot more effort going into this. This needs to really be, as we've been saying, a whole of government approach, not just the military, not just the intelligence community, but as we see here, FAA, perhaps NASA, Department of Homeland Security. We could even go into, for example, the academic and scientific communities, like the National Science Foundation, and maybe establish something that looks something like a federal lab construct, where we can really get the best and brightest to really look at this incredible enigma we're now facing.
Let me just rephrase it without getting into all the theories about, if it's not human, then it is something. I have no idea, but I'm just fixated on the idea that given the data we now have, it doesn't seem like these could be human. Have you heard, or from a human source, have you heard anybody offer up a plausible explanation for how human beings could be responsible for these sightings?
No, and I'll share with you even a little bit more insight. When I've had my private communications with some of my former colleagues and some people that are still in Washington, D.C., the conversation that these being non-human vehicles and controlled vehicles, but still intelligently controlled by something or someone, is certainly not off the table. These are conversations that are absolutely occurring. But again, because as the report stipulates, because of stigma and taboo, no one's having this conversation really publicly yet. In fact, if you read, I think it's probably towards the end of the report, they say that our airmen still don't even want to have this conversation with colleagues because they fear retribution. And that's part of the problem, having this conversation.
Okay, so that was pretty significant. Tucker Carlson asked him point blank, is there a plausible way for these things to be human? And Lou says no. Now, I would add that, of course, you could say that they could be time travelers or something like that, or if we're seeded, maybe we're all seeded from common genetics. You see the Nordics that are very human-like. So, there are ways for these things to be human or human-like, I believe, but it was very good that Lou just went right out and said no. Because what that really means to me is that they're not our kind of human. They're not modern human from our modern civilization, whether they look human or not. And some of them really don't seem to look human at all. But what did he have to say about the UAP task force report itself? Basically, he says, Congress is now informed that the UFOs, UAPs, are real, they're not ours, and some of them are performing in remarkable ways. And he also seems to be encouraged that now there is a way to go forward with a permanent funded program. This is only a preliminary report, hinting that there will be future reports to come. In my reading of the report, I was encouraged that it seemed to be advocating for future research in a permanently funded program. It said something about the future of the task force or its successor. So I would anticipate that's what we're going to see. My big question is, how public are the results of that successor or continuation going to be? Is this going to be another Project Blue Book where they give us this public program but really hide the juicy results? Or are they actually going to disclose some interesting results? My own takeaway from the UAP Task Force report was that it was exactly what it needed to be. It didn't push the alien agenda or theory too far to alienate, Congress or the public, but it pushed it just far enough, saying, it's not us. We can't find anyone else that it could be. It could be China, it could be Russia, but it didn't really push that very much. It just kind of floated that idea. But it did it stayed fairly neutral on what the UAP UFOs could be. But it did say it wasn't us, and it did not push the idea that it could be a foreign adversary very far. So we are left with the question, well, if it's not us, if it's not China, if it's not Russia, who could it be? It's definitely straddling the fence, but it's straddling it, leaning in one particular direction, the direction of future study and future research, which is exactly what it needed to do. We need a permanently funded program in the public eye to carry this forward. And that's what really concerns me now, is how public is that going to be? We don't need any more secrets on this issue. We need the government to actually pony up and give us some information. That is what we are paying them to do. They are public servants. We are the bosses. Anyway, so I was a little disappointed by the report, honestly. I was hoping for a little bit more, maybe some more videos. I wasn't expecting any definitive conclusion, or for them even to go so far as to say it wasn't a foreign adversary. But in fact, they went a little further in that direction than I thought they would, so that was encouraging. But I was hoping for some photos, some video, something to really further the conversation. Instead, it just kind of legitimized the conversation, which I think is an important step. It did legitimize the conversation, and it allowed for future study and a continuation of the task force or some successor program. So really, this is a victory. It's just not a very exciting victory. And, I look forward to going from here and seeing what results with the addendum that I want this to be a public program and the results of it to be as public as possible. Anyway, that's my take. What did you think? Share in the comments below what you thought of the UAP Task Force report. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing, and if you do, please hit the bell next to it to be notified of future videos. Okay, that's it for me for today. Please give this video a big thumbs up. I would really appreciate it. And until next time, Cosmic Road out.